Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a real classic, aren't we? The Tamiya Frog, the Blackfoot, Monster Beetle,
Yeah.
all those great ORV chassis buggies and trucks.
Absolutely. So much nostalgia there. Many people's first real RC car.
Totally. But if you've run them hard, you probably know about, well, the Achilles heel,
Yeah.
the stock differential, and the gearbox.
Oh, yeah. It's let's say, characterful, known weak spot.
So our mission today is to really dig into why it fails, and maybe more importantly, what you, the listener, can actually do about it. How can you keep these awesome vintage runners going strong?
Right. And before we dive into the failures, maybe just a quick reminder on what a diff does.
Good point. Basically, it lets the outside wheel turn faster than the inside wheel when you're cornering,
Yeah.
right? So the car doesn't scrub or hop.
Exactly. But the ORV's diff design is unique. It's not self-contained like modern ones. It relies on those stamped metal gearbox side plates and these little plastic bearing holders to keep everything aligned.
Ah, okay. So those plates flex.
That's the core issue. Any flex, any movement in those side plates directly messes with how the diff gears mesh together. And that's where the trouble starts.
Okay, so walk us through the common failures. What's likely to happen first? What should you listen for?
Well, the most common thing you'll probably experience is that awful clicking or grinding sound, especially under power.
Yeah, the dreaded click of death.
Pretty much. That's the internal bevel gears inside the differential being forced apart. They slip against each other instead of meshing smoothly. And like we said, that gearbox plate flex is usually the main culprit.
Okay, so flex causes the gears to separate. What else goes wrong?
You can also get wear on the splines, the little teeth on the drive cups where they connect to the main differential gear. If those wear down, you lose drive to one wheel.
Ah, so one wheel spins, the other doesn't.
Exactly. And that little metal rod connecting the drive cups inside is important there too. Then, of course, the gears themselves, the bevel gears and the main diff gear can just wear out or get chewed up, especially if you've put a hotter motor in or if the mesh was off to begin with.
And you mentioned the plastic bearing retainers.
Yeah, those little B1 parts, they can get loose or sloppy over time, letting the whole diff assembly kind of wobble around in the gearbox.
Which makes the gear mesh even worse, I imagine.
Precisely, it all sort of cascades. One problem makes another one worse. Oh, and don't forget the original drive shafts.
Right, the hex drive shafts. They weren't exactly known for strength, especially with more power.
Not at all. They strip out pretty easily. It's all connected in that rear end.
So it sounds like just putting in a faster motor is asking for trouble without addressing these points.
It definitely highlights the weaknesses, yeah. More power equals more stress. Plus, these are often old kits. Plastic gets brittle, metal fatigues, and lack of proper grease just makes everything wear faster.
Okay, so let's say your diff is starting to make noise. What are some simpler things you can try first? Maybe less expensive options.
Well, a common first step is shimming. You can add thin 5mm shims, like Tamiya part 53587, between the large bevel gear and its bearing inside the diff.
What does that do?
It takes up some of the internal slop, helps keep those bevel gears meshed a bit tighter. You have to be careful not to over-shim it, though, or it'll bind.
Right. And does that fix the flex issue?
No, that's the thing. It helps the internal meshing, but it doesn't stop the gearbox plates from flexing or fix those sloppy plastic bearing holders. It's like a partial improvement.
What about grease? I hear people talk about packing it with thick grease.
Yeah, using something really sticky and thick like Tamiya's anti-wear grease, the AEW
It's
grease.
belly blue stuff.
That's the one. It can sort of cushion the gears and create a bit of a limited slip effect through sheer stickiness. But again, it's not a mechanical fix. It can get pushed out. It changes with temperature. It's another Band-Aid, really.
Okay. Then there are some more hands-on mods, right? Like the screw mod.
Yeah, the old frog shot screw mod is quite well known in the community. That directly addresses the drive cups separating. You basically drill and tap the drive cups and put a screw through to lock them together.
So they physically can't be pushed apart.
Exactly. It's a clever fix for that specific failure mode. And checking your gearbox plates, making sure they're perfectly flat is super important. Maybe even gluing those B1 bearing retainers in place for a bit more stability.
And the drive shafts. If you're doing all this, you probably want better drive shafts.
Absolutely. Ditch the stock hex ones if you still have them. The dog bones from the re-releases are a huge improvement. You can often buy them as spare parts, like numbers 13080, A038, and A039, I think.
What about Universal's CVDs?
Tamiya makes Universals part 53908. They're smoother, but honestly, they can sometimes bind a bit with the ORV suspension travel. Dog bones are usually the more robust, simpler solution here.
Okay, so those are ways to bolster the stock setup. But if
Mhm.
you really want durability, especially with brushless power, what's the next level? People always mention the MIP diff.
Right, the MIP Super Ball differential, part number 16210. This is like the purpose-built engineered solution. It replaces the stock gear diff entirely.
And it's a ball diff, not a gear diff. What's the difference there?
Yeah, so instead of bevel gears, it uses small steel balls sandwiched between hardened steel plates or rings. Friction between the balls and plates transmits the power.
Okay.
The key thing is you can adjust the pressure on those plates with a screw that lets you tune how much slip the differential has. You get adjustable limited slip action.
Ah, so you can dial in the traction. And it's stronger.
Much stronger. It uses a machine gear, hardened steel internals, hardened alloy drive cups, bigger bearings. It's designed for higher power. Made in the USA, too. It's a quality piece.
Sounds impressive. Is it just a drop-in replacement for all ORV models?
Not quite. This is crucial. It's a direct bolt-on for the re-released 2016 Blackfoot and 2015 Monster Beetle if you're using standard universal drive shafts compatible with those kits.
Okay, what about the Frog or the Brat, original or re-release?
For those, you'll need more parts. You typically need that Tamiya Universal Shaft Kit, the hashtag 53908 one we mentioned.
The ones that might bind.
Potentially, yeah.
Mm.
It's a known compatibility point to check. You also need the counter gear from the Blackfoot or Monster Beetle gearbox that's Tamiya part, hashtag 9335026. And usually a 16-tooth pinion gear, hashtag 3515004. Oh, and maybe bearings for that counter gear if your kit doesn't have them.
Wow, okay, so it's not just the diff cost. There are potentially several other parts needed depending on your specific car.
Exactly. You need to budget for the whole conversion. Assembly involves building the thrust bearing, putting the balls and rings in the gear, getting the tension right.
How do you set the tension initially?
MIP recommends tightening the screw until it bottoms out gently, then backing it off about a quarter turn. That's a starting point. You listen for a little bit of slip, like a slight tire chirp or bark on sharp turns on high grip surfaces, and tighten it just enough to get good forward drive without it being totally locked.
Requires a bit of tuning then. And a good 2mm hex driver, I bet.
Absolutely essential for that main screw.
Were there ever any other aftermarket diffs, like back in the day?
There were. The Thorpe Dirt Burners ball diffs were the go-to upgrade back then, but finding one now, they're rare, incredibly expensive, and honestly, probably too fragile or worn out to actually run hard today due to age. More for collectors.
So realistically, the MIP is the main modern aftermarket choice.
Pretty much the only readily available direct fit performance option, yeah. You can't really adapt diffs from other Tamiya models without major custom work.
Okay, so let's boil it down. Stock improvements versus the MIP. What's the quick comparison?
Stock fixes. Low cost, moderate improvement, keeps the stock feel, but relies on those weak gearbox plates and doesn't fundamentally solve the flex. It's DIY heavy.
And the MIP.
High cost, especially with the extra parts potentially needed. Excellent durability, proper tunable limited slip action. But it requires maintenance, careful setup, and changes the gearing slightly.
Right, because of that different counter gear and pinion.
Yeah.
You might need something like an adjustable motor mount to get your gearing options back.
Yeah, that's another related upgrade people often consider, like the CRP adjustable mount, to regain that flexibility.
Okay, makes sense. So, final thoughts. If someone's listening, trying to decide what to do, what would you recommend?
All right, let's break it down. If you're just a casual basher, maybe running a stock motor or a mild upgrade,
Yeah, just running around the yard.
then I'd say focus on the stock improvements, do the shimming, use good AEW grease, maybe the screw mod if you're keen, and definitely upgrade to dog bone drive shafts. Make sure those gearbox plates are flat. That's your best bang for the buck.
Okay, what about someone who wants more performance? Running brushless, really pushing it.
Then you probably want the MIP Super Ball diff. It's built for that kind of power and abuse. Just be prepared for the cost, sourcing the other needed Tamiya parts, and the regular ball diff maintenance. And yeah, consider that adjustable motor mount.
And finally, the vintage collector or restorer.
For pure Shelf Queen originality, you'd stick with stock parts, maybe just do the shimming carefully. If you want to run a vintage car reliably but aren't a stickler for 100% original parts, the MIP is a great functional upgrade, even if it's not period correct. The Thorpe diff, that's really only if you're a serious collector aiming for period correct modifications.
Fantastic overview. So it seems the ORV diff is definitely a weak point, a famous one even, but it's not insurmountable.
Not at all. Whether you patch up the stock unit or go for the full MIP upgrade, you can make these iconic Tamiyas run reliably today. It's kind of cool, actually, that blend of vintage charm and the modern solutions available.
Absolutely. A testament to how much people still love these old kits. Thanks so much for this deep dive.
My pleasure. Happy wrenching.